I'm your huckleberry.
That's it, man. Game over, man. Game over.
Are you not entertained? Are you not entertained?
Miserable bloody Romans, no sense of humour.
I'm sorry, Dave. I'm afraid I can't do that.
You got to ask yourself one question. Do I feel lucky? Well, do you, Bunk?
My calculations are correct. When this baby hits 88 miles per hour, you're gonna see some serious shit.
Dead or alive, you are coming with me.
Are you gonna bark all day, little doggy? Or are you gonna bite?
All right, Mr. DeMille, I'm ready for my close-up.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Film Fanatics podcast where we talk about movies and our love for them. My name is Tim.
James.
Call me Santi.
And I'm Jeff.
And for this theme for our first season, we chose films that we love. And we each took two films that we love and we're going to make them into each episodes, just talking about them in general and what we love about them, defend them if we have to, that kind of thing. So our first film for the first episode is Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, directed by Terry Gilliam. James B. chose this one. And James, why don't you give us the synopsis of this movie before we delve into everything else?
Well, the synopsis is kind of difficult, but basically it starts off with a journalist is going to Las Vegas to cover a motorcycle race, and it kind of just goes off the rails after that. I picked this movie. I just love this movie. I can't really. I'm not sure how to make an argument for it. It's just a great ride. I love watching it. I always have a fun time watching it. You know, yeah. So, anyway,
basically, like I was saying to you earlier, I was like, this is basically the whole entire movie is just like what it would be like to be on acid, I guess, if you've never dropped acid or you've never done drugs. It's basically a fever dreams directed by Gilliam as written by Hunter S. Thompson, I guess.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But, so yeah, Fear and Loathing, we've got the critics' consensus pulled up. Jeff, you've got that, and basically IMDb Rotten what they have to say.
Yeah, so on Rotten Tomatoes, the tomato meter is at 49% for that one. As far as the IMDb score goes, that's a 7.7. So, for example, we'll give you Ebert's review, and this was written January 1st of 2000. If you encounter characters like this on an elevator, you'd push a button to get off at the next floor. Here, the elevator is trapped between floors for 128 minutes.
Why did it take so long to write that review? It's like 2 years later?
2 years later, because the movie was released in 98 and he wrote it in 2000. Maybe he had a bunch of films to review on his plate or something.
Yeah. To me, that's not even really a critique, because it's like, that's what the movie is. So,
yeah.
You know, if you go into it expecting to love the characters, then you're going to be disappointed, you know. But
speaking of elevators, there's even a couple scenes in the movie with elevators.
There's a lot of scenes in the movie with elevators.
Yeah. Some awkward encounters in the elevators. Right. Yeah.
Like me personally, to crush everyone's dreams about this who love this movie, I just don't get into it at all. I totally respect the filmmaking of it, the acting. But trying to watch it, I'm just like, where are we going with this? I mean, I am bored or I am crazy after a few minutes of each scene, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, let's delve right into as far as the direction of the movie. Like the director himself, Terry Gilliam, he's kind of like, he's known for kind of outlandish films, kind of art films, so to speak. A lot
of whimsical fairy tale kind of stuff.
What's your guys' opinion on him? I guess we'll start with James B. What do you think of him, his overall filmography?
Terry Gilliam.
Yeah.
I haven't seen all of his stuff. I've seen 12 Monkeys. I've seen, the Monty Python stuff. I've seen the Imaginarium of Dr. Parnassus. I've seen Oh, geez.
Fisher King.
Yeah, The Fisher King I thought was a great movie.
What do you think, Santi?
Same thing. He does have a great style, and you do know you're watching a Terry Gilliam film because of his whimsical, abstract vision of whatever he's shooting. It's just like this film and all his other ones. They have that it's almost like a fantasy.
Yeah, for sure.
Adventure of the life that you're living. While you're outside in the real world, you're stuck in his mind, and it's crazy to be in there. But just this film particularly, I did not get into. I love his other films, like in Fisher King is great, 12 Monkeys, as I said twice before.
What do you think, Jeff?
Yeah, I'm on board with what everybody's saying. I mean, he definitely has his own style. He's one of those guys that when you put on his movies, you're like, oh yeah, I know who made this one. So
one thing I notice about his movies is he interjects, and it's kind of the Monty Python thing, but he interjects a lot of like satire, political satire, and stuff.
I could see that, the whole Vietnam thing in this one for sure, like you were saying before we started recording.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, like I was saying before, I think that a lot of the movie is almost sort of like a comedy, but the narration that Johnny Depp does as Hunter S. Thompson is kind of like the political aspect of it, I guess. I think the narration is sort of like the end of the hippie culture and him kind of reminiscing on things.
Mm-hmm. What do you think about the direction of the film?
I love the direction of the film. I think Gilliam is a great director. I like a lot of his like tracking shots, like especially in where they first get to the hotel in the beginning of the movie, and the patrons start turning into reptiles because he's on acid, and it kind of just pans across the bar, and there's all this chaos going on. I think that's kind of that's a good like introduction to how Gilliam kind of directs. You know, just chaos going on while the scene's taking place.
Yeah. I was saying earlier that he had like especially with the tracking shots, like what you were talking about, he kind of like creates a tapestry of like, with a tapestry you see this whole panoramic view of like an entire scene, and he kind of paints that, and like there's just weird stuff going on in the background, especially with this film more than any of his other films, just like weird, just like I keep going back to Fever Dream, and it's just like Fever Dream, acid trip, just stuff going on in the background, but you're also paying attention to like Johnny Depp and what he's doing and his character, and just being a weirdo, I guess.
Right. I mean, it's his world. He creates very detailed worlds that you get sucked into.
Yeah.
What I talked about this one before is that, like, it feels like we talked how he wanted this film either be the greatest film you enjoyed or you hated it. And me, like I said, I respect the filming process itself, but I don't get into it. But you either have to be really high to enjoy the film, because if you're not and you're watching it, even though he's trying to pull you into that type of experience, you're just like, oh God, I can't get into this. But unless you got something, puffing on something or whatever, you got that better experience with it.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's true across the board, because I think Tim likes this movie.
Yeah, I just like, as a side note, I've never done drugs in my entire life, but like I really loved this.
No, I trust me, it's true.
I mean, I think I don't think you have to be like a coke addict to be enjoy this film. But I mean, I think you get a better experience if you are on something than
Yeah, that's definitely true.
What'd you say?
A psychedelic drug movie more so than a coke one. But
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, they run the gamut with all the drugs in this movie. Like they pretty much hit on every drug known to man, pretty much.
A whole checklist in a suitcase.
Oh, the iconic what was that line?
I don't know it. I don't know it
by
memorized.
heart. Yeah. But it's just like a checklist of what he has in the trunk. But yeah. Well, we kind of touched on it. We might as well get into it. The story, the narration of this is probably where Santi's gonna kind of differ with.
I think those are two different things, really, because the narration is more like the parts where he's just typing, and he's just reading what he's typed, that's kind of different. That almost has nothing to do with the actual story of the movie, like as far as what's going on with these two characters.
Because I guess it makes sense to be in his mind. Like, I don't know. I personally feel narration is lazy storytelling, but with this film, it's not really about any type of linear storytelling.
Right.
What do you guys think? Do you think it's like, would this film be better with narration and with the narration out of it?
Oh, no, I think the narration kind of makes it. I think it would be a lot more... I think it would be kind of a boring movie without the narration, actually. Mm-hmm. I think that's kind of what makes it. Especially like the scenes where they do the ether and then they're walking into the, to go to the carnival or whatever. And he's talking about how like it makes you feel like the drunk in an early Irish novel and stuff. He's telling you what it does, If you didn't have the narration, you're just watching them like stumble and trip towards a turnstile, and it wouldn't have the same effect as it does with the narration behind it.
Yeah, I can see that.
Yeah, I have to kind of agree with that. Like, you kind of keep waiting for Johnny Depp to like, kind of, what's he have to say about this? Because we know he's going to say something. And he always, like, the narration I felt like was more comical than some of the stuff in the movie itself.
Yeah, for sure.
I think with the narration, in a way, it kept me interested in the movie because I was like, okay, well, he's going to come back at some point, and then I'll have something to latch onto again.
Right.
But
because it's comfortable. It feels like he's talking to you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It works to, like, bring you back, balance you out a little bit in a way.
Yeah. And kind of understand like what's going on in certain parts, because I think that like without the narration there would be parts where you wouldn't really understand why they're doing certain things.
Yeah,
right.
That brings up the subject. I mean, is that bad directing if you can't understand where the film's going, even though it's basically what he's trying to do? Would that make the film a little more interesting? That since it's already so chaotic, you think without the narration it could have made you think more about the story yourself, or maybe it's just him just trying to get the story going?
I feel like the narration is part of Gilliam's directing, if you look at it from this perspective, because I mean, obviously the director has final say in pretty much, unless you're the studio, because you can override the director, but the director has final say in the final cut as far as where he wants the narration placed, if the narration works in this spot or it doesn't. I feel like that ties into the directing aspect of it, and I mean it's part of the storytelling. I don't feel like it's weak directing or weak storytelling. I feel like it complements it, but I mean, I understand the argument why narration would be considered like weak storytelling. I get that, but
yeah, there's some movies where the narration is kind of like cheap. It's because I know there's kind of like a unwritten rule that you should show and not tell.
Yeah,
but I think in this movie, it's not the narration isn't really telling anything. It's just kind of like.
Right.
Yeah.
To add credit to your argument is the fact that, I mean, he is a journalist and he did write this stuff, so I guess you kind of want to know his words. Right.
And I mean, like if you read the book, it's not going on at the same time. It's, he goes on these rants and then he explains what happens, and then, whereas in the movie it kind of combines the two, and I think it works. Whereas if you read the book, it kind of seems disconnected from the actual story of what's going on in Vegas, because he's constantly going off topic and talking about this stuff. But the movie makes it so that it's kind of seamless, so that the story keeps going on while it's narrating.
Okay.
So yeah, basically, there's another thing I wanted to point out about the story itself was, from what I understand, I've never, just full disclaimer, I've never read the book that it's based on, but from what a lot of people say, the book itself is, outside of like what you were saying, James, the kind of, he goes off on tangents a lot in the book, but they said overall it's spot on to the book. Like, they basically just took Hunter S. Thompson's book and made it into the script, and then he served as the consultant on the movie.
Yeah, there's a handful of things that aren't in the book, like the scene with Gary Busey, the part where he's like, "Can I get a little kiss? It's lonely out here." That's not in the book. And I've watched the commentary that actually has Hunter S. Thompson making comments while he's watching it, and he hated that part because he was just like, it doesn't happen, or it didn't actually happen. And if you watch the movie, the very next scene is Johnny Depp saying like, the pig had done me on all fronts. I felt raped, and and Hunter S. Thompson felt like that was implying that he actually did get raped by the cop. But yeah, apparently that line was ad-libbed. Like Gary Busey just thought that would be a good line.
He's doing Gary Busey.
Gary Busey moments.
Yeah. With that's good that you brought up like specific characters and the way they acted in the movie. Because Jeff, what did you think of the overall acting of the movie?
I thought that was probably one of the better things in the movie. I don't know if that gives away how I feel about the movie overall, but they played the parts flawlessly. I mean, as far as acting high on drugs constantly, and they made it super believable. I mean,
yeah,
you felt like Johnny Depp knew what it was like to be on an ether binge.
Yeah. I felt that.
Yeah, like especially. The one thing that I kept coming back to when I was watching just the performance was especially Johnny Depp. Not as much Del Toro, but Johnny Depp seemed like his mannerisms and everything were obviously like him being high and stuff, but I felt like he was channeling silent film stars. Like his mannerisms,
and stuff like that.
Just like a lot of physical acting and like a lot of like gags and stuff like that, and like kind of working off of he was kind of chewing the scenery a little bit, but in a good way. And like he was just kind of, I kept coming back to like Charlie Chaplin, Buster Keaton, like just physical comedy,
Yeah.
And it's definitely his character that makes you drawn into the film. That really, I mean, obviously you want your characters to be good, but his over the topness is what makes this film. It is. If it was any other actor playing this part, the film probably would never be known as the classic that it is now.
Right. Yeah. Well, was it Bill Murray that played Hunter S. Thompson at one point in Where the Buffalo?
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah.
Yeah, I've wanted to see that, but it's hard to get a hold of. Which I guess it's now on Blu-ray, but I have not seen that movie.
I mean, when you think Hunter S. Thompson, you think Johnny Depp, like.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah, exactly.
I think that's kind of.
Even down to how he looks in it, like is almost like spot on, like it's perfect.
Yeah, he looks like young Hunter S. Thompson from the 60s and 70s.
Makeup people, they did their job just right.
It's funny you bring that up because I read that the way they made him look like Hunter S. Thompson, as far as his hair and stuff goes, literally all it was Hunter S. Thompson had Johnny Depp in his kitchen, shaved his head in a hard miner hat. And, like, it was just, I can only imagine that scene, like, walking in, like, Terry Gilliam's like, all right, you guys ready? And it's just, like Hunter S. Thompson, shaving off everything and in a hard miner hat of all things. Like, I don't know why that.
And then Johnny Depp didn't want to look in a mirror because he was like,
yeah.
Yeah, I think as far as the over the top stuff, I think, to me, the quality of this movie is the absurdity.
Yeah.
Like, it's just so wild, like you don't see there. I don't feel like there's other movies like this except for maybe like Trainspotting.
You want to know something? I have never seen that movie.
You freaking
Everyone, I heard that the second one that came out recently was kind of, we're getting off topic, but yeah, essentially, yeah, I've never seen that movie. But you said it's like Trainspotting?
Just in how absurd it is.
Oh.
Like, maybe the drug cultures thing and a lot of hallucinations they have in the films.
Right. Like, there's not a lot of movies like this. Like, we were talking about, like, what genre is this movie? Is this a comedy? Or is this
I don't know. Seeing a dead baby always makes me laugh.
So dark
Spot.
humor, like black comedy.
Uh-huh.
I would think it's more along the lines of like almost like a black comedy, because there's certain aspects where they're like talking about like, what was that? Was it Christina Ricci's character later on in the film? Like talking about how...
Oh, and they're talking in the hallway, and Johnny Depp's like, so we're going to peddle her ass to the cops, you know?
And they're going to run a gang rape on her or whatever. But like stuff like that, obviously it's not going to fly. Like you probably couldn't get away with that today, but like at least talking about that in a movie as much.
Yeah.
But
which he was only saying that. I think the point of that was his character was trying to be like, do you realize how like horrible this looks?
Yeah.
You know, like if you got caught with this girl that you're doping up, it's not going to look good for you, you know?
It happened a few times in the movie, but they dug themselves into like some weird hole that didn't need to be there and then somehow got out, even though maybe the hole wasn't real to begin with. But in their minds, they're creating that stuff. And they're like, we got to fix the situation. And then all of a sudden, he's in a different hotel room and showed him getting on a plane, and all that stuff. Man, it's just...
I feel like normally when we talk about a story to a movie, we could probably go through it linear-wise, but because this movie is the way it is, I feel like we can't give a normal, like, this is what happens in the story. Let's talk about it, because it's all over the place. It's just, I don't know.
No, you'd be nailed down exactly with it.
Yeah.
There's not a typical story arc. It's not the hero's journey. You know what I mean? And I think that might be kind of like where the charm is in it for me, just because it's so different than everything else. You don't see a lot of movies like this where it's just absurdity from start to finish.
Right.
Unless it's a stupid comedy. But and you could call it a comedy, but I don't think you could call it a stupid comedy.
No, I wouldn't, like you were talking about earlier, like the lumping, like where would we classify this? Like obviously it's a comedy, but like there's obviously subgenres, and like you could consider it a drug film, like along the lines of, you know, Half Baked, but it's not in that same category, even if you're going to lump it in with like Half Baked or Pineapple Express, because those are just like...
It's definitely a bit more artsy than those kind of movies are. It's not just like a silly...
Right, because even those films have a linear story. I mean, they all have a plot that something happens, that they learn something, they learn love, self-respect. Nothing happens to this in the end. It's the Jerry Seinfeld of drug films.
Right, yeah, that's a good way of looking at it.
That's actually pretty good. The Jerry Seinfeld of drug films.
If we're trying to figure out a genre, you could even say it's a biography.
Yeah, that's true.
Mm-hmm.
Well, not...
I mean, it is Hunter S. Thompson's life. I mean...
I would say it's a snippet of his life, not necessarily maybe yeah. Not like a biopic or anything like that, and I know you love biopics, but... but like, I would say it's probably like a black comedy, drug film, just partial biopic.
Just a glimpse behind the curtain of who Hunter S. Thompson is and was.
Yeah. Because, like, the story itself is, like, I guess supposed to be a critique somewhat of, like, the end of the hippie age and, like, the drug culture surrounding the hippies.
Yeah, I think it's kind of like a lament. Like that, I think part of the narration is kind of like Johnny Depp's frustrated. Well, not Johnny Depp, you know, Hunter S. Thompson. He's kind of frustrated because nothing happened out of it. You know, he's just left dropping acid, and all the hippies went home. You know,
all the hippies end up going back to shopping on QVC and ruining the world for everyone else later.
Right.
Didn't they even say at the end of the movie he felt it was changing at the times?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's kind of like what it is he's, you know, a lot of the movie is him reminiscing on the hippie culture and just, you know, nothing happened out of it. Like that, there's a scene where he's narrating and he's talking about how, there's a line where he says something to the effect of, if you look west with the right kind of eyes, you can see where the high water mark broke and the wave rolled back. And I think that's kind of like, if there is any like story or any like point to it, it's kind of that. It's kind of his lament of like the hippie culture and how nothing actually changed, you know.
Because even the times, I mean, the late 90s, that was pretty much the death rattle of hippies. I mean, obviously they hadn't been very useful for like 20 years, if ever, but the fact that the 90s was pretty much where you had to grow up. It was those films kind of reflected that time.
Yeah.
It wasn't. The film wasn't based on the 90s,
Was it?
I thought it was based more towards the end of the 60s, early 70s, right?
It was the
What
70s.
I thought the timeline of the film was late 90s.
No, it was 70s, set in the 70s.
Yeah, it was like 71.
Because if you look at the cars...
Oh, that's right, yeah.
The casinos that were used in the times, like, I mean, you didn't see any of the new casinos that are currently in Vegas or anything like that.
I could see, though, how, like, someone, like, let's say someone goes into this movie blind, doesn't know who Hunter S. Thompson is, doesn't know, it's kind of like it's cliched to say this, but it's a timeless film, so to speak, in terms of the timeline, because in the 90s, like, if you watch movies like Swingers that are set in the 90s, like Jon Favreau and stuff, they're big into the swing culture, and like that was all about going back to like the 50s and 60s, and like someone going in could probably think it's set in the 90s, but it's just like kind of like that movie where it's just like,
yeah, that's basically how I went in, because I didn't know anything about Hunter S. Thompson. I thought this was just when I first saw it like 10 years ago, whatever. I didn't know who this guy was or anything. I thought it was just a wacky, weird film until I learned more about it.
Yeah.
But you're right. That's exactly it.
Yeah.
One thing I like to point out is some of the cameos in this film. There are like a ton of cameos. And from what I understand, the cameos were obviously all famous or semi-famous actors at the time, but like they all, to one degree, liked Hunter S. Thompson or knew Hunter S. Thompson, especially Harry Dean Stanton. Harry Dean Stanton was in the movie, and he played, like, during this dream sequence, I guess you could call it.
Yeah.
He played the judge in this, like, trial about Christina Ricci, like, accusing the two main characters of rape and whatever.
Basically, his only lines are castration. Double castration.
But, like, I mean, not only Harry Dean Stanton, but you got, like, Cameron Diaz in the elevator scene. You got Christina Ricci, obviously. Mark Harmon, Penn Jillette, Flea, just to name a few.
Vern Troyer.
Vern Troyer's in there. But just a ton of cameos. But they all had connections to Hunter S. Thompson, from what I understand. I could be totally wrong about that.
Yeah, I didn't know that. That's interesting.
Was John Cusack, was he a cameo in that? Because apparently he was good friends with him.
I think I read somewhere that John Cusack was going to play someone in the movie.
He was going to play. Thompson, actually.
Yeah, there was a ton of people that were interested in playing, but ultimately, obviously, went to Johnny Depp. But I think Cusack would have been great. To be honest with you, like, I mean, Johnny Depp was obviously knocked it out of the park, but I don't know. Cusack would have probably been really good.
It would have been good, but like we were talking about earlier, I don't think it would be the film that people enjoy for because of Depp. With Cusack, he would approach it more like a real character. I mean, Johnny Depp he almost uses like a cartoon character. Yeah. Where I think Cusack would have been more grounded in his approach.
Would have been more, yeah.
Yeah, that's probably true. I mean, in terms of the acting, this might be one of my favorite. Well, it is one of my favorite Del Toro performances. I think he's great in this movie.
A lot of people talk about Johnny Depp, but yeah, Del Toro knocked it out of the park too. With he plays like from what I understand, a hybrid bastard version of like his real life lawyer, Hunter S. Thompson's real life lawyer in the movie, but he plays like a weird version of it.
Yeah, I mean, apparently from what I've read, is the actual character himself was actually a really like straight up professional guy, but then he would like take a weekend and go get messed up. Yeah.
Yeah, Del Toro. What is it that he gained like 40 pounds? Was it?
40 pounds, yeah.
40 pounds just for the role, because obviously the real life guy was kind of chubby, but like apparently ate donuts all day for like who knows how long. just to get into that shape. I don't understand how actors can even do that to begin with. Like, you got Bale, who's like,
there's method, and then there's just Jesus. I mean,
Yeah.
40 pounds. I mean, I've struggled with weight all my life, and just think about him, eating that, and then he probably lost it right for the next film, didn't he?
Yeah.
Right, probably.
Yeah, because Traffic, he was not nowhere near his weight for Traffic, which was his next film. But he's definitely in that camp of method actors.
Is that the one he got nominated for Best Actor?
He nominated one.
He won.
Yeah, he won it.
Oh, for Traffic?
For best supporting actor. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Wow.
But that launched his career, so to speak. I don't think that Fear and Loathing launched his career. I think it got him on the map to be considered for other films.
Yeah,
Right.
one thing I've read I think this might have been an interview with Depp. It was like an interview with Depp and Del Toro, and they were saying that after this movie, it was kind of hard for like the rest of Hollywood to take them seriously for some reason. Like,
I can see that.
Yeah, there was kind of like an air of like, oh, you guys do like crazy outlandish roles, and if we wanted you to rein it in and be a serious character, we can't trust that you can do that.
Right. Like they almost typecasted themselves, even though they weren't trying to.
It's always
I'd say
hard
they've
to see Johnny Depp not in a Tim Burton movie. So.
That's true.
And I'd say they both overcome that. Like Del Toro's been in all kinds of great, like Sicario and all kinds of stuff. But
and he's like versatile because he can go from like something like Traffic, something with serious like role, to like Guardians of the Galaxy, where he and then like the Marvel movies where he plays the Collector, and like
what is he in Guardians of the Galaxy?
He made a brief appearance in that, and then he was more in he played the Collector, the white hair.
Oh right, okay.
And like he had Howard the Duck at the end in one of those cells and stuff.
Okay,
but like he has a whole range, and I feel like Johnny Depp is kind of the same way. He can go from like Fear and Loathing to like a horror film like
what did he do after Fear and Loathing?
Oh, he probably.
Oh man, who knows?
Jeff, you got the computer up in front of you.
Yeah, let me pull it up real quick.
You can pull up his filmography.
I know a few years ago when I saw Black Mass, I was like, oh yeah, Johnny Depp's an awesome actor. Like, because he, for a while he's been kind of doing like a lot of Disney stuff, a lot of like more.
He did the whole Pirates of the Caribbean thing,
and he was Tonto and the Lone Ranger and stuff
by the way,
that.
That's a great film. I don't care what anyone says.
Really? Okay.
I have never seen it.
I've seen it. I didn't think it was
great. It's fun. It's really nice.
All right.
I didn't think it was terrible.
After Fear and Loathing, Del Toro was in Snatch, The Way of the Gun, Traffic.
Oh.
That was all in 2000.
Snatch was before that.
The Hunted, 21 Grams, Sin City, Things We Lost in the Fire, Che, Part 1, Part 2, The Wolfman.
Wolfman.
Yeah. Savages.
We can forget that ever happened.
Oh, no, I love that movie.
Oh, what?
So, yeah, I mean, he had a pretty diverse group of films there. It's not like he was playing the same thing over and over.
Yeah. Snatch, I love Snatch. That's one of my favorite movies. But
yeah, and then Johnny Depp, Ninth Gate, Astronaut's Wife, Sleepy Hollow, Man Who Cried, From Hell.
So he did some straightforward films pretty much after that for a while.
Yeah. Except for maybe the wait, what was the list again?
For what?
What he did after?
Because he did Ninth Gate and then Astronaut's Wife.
Right. Oh, for Johnny Depp, yeah, he had a ton of work after this movie, and I mean, as far as character-wise, it was all over the place.
I mean, he did that with what's his face, who likes girls.
Both of those movies were pretty serious roles.
Astronaut's Wife, Sleepy Hollow, The Man Who Cried, Before Night Falls, Chocolat.
Such a brilliant film.
Low, From Hell, then the Pirates movies started. Secret Window, did a voice on King of the Hill, so I could appreciate that. Yeah.
Probably his most eccentric film role just after those was probably Sleepy Hollow. And even then, that's pretty straightforward.
That's probably
Tim Burton. Excuse me. Having a seizure. I need my medicine.
I think
medicine.
I think honestly, like Depp was more of an established actor before this film took place.
Oh yeah.
Like because he had the Burton films and everything like that, and then Ed Wood, which was a Burton film, I guess. But like
Gilbert Grape.
Gilbert Grape,
yeah.
that was that one. Crybaby, stuff like that. So I mean, like he was already established. I think it was Del Toro.
His most important role, A Nightmare on Elm Street.
Oh yeah, he was.
That was his first movie.
Yeah.
How can you say that? Jump Street, obviously.
Jump Street.
That's a TV show though.
But
a little later.
That's still a role, I guess. I mean,
Yeah, it was more of a launching platform for Del Toro, so to speak, I guess, because. I mean,
Yeah, I mean, I guess I kind of. I know I saw an interview where they were talking about how it was hard for people to take them seriously, but if you look at their credits, it doesn't really seem that way. I mean, because Traffic was a very serious movie, and then, The Ninth Gate was serious. The Astronaut's Wife was serious.
Del Toro, though, I mean, since he wasn't established like Depth was, maybe he had a little more leeway. In fact, that they didn't recognize him from this compared to Traffic because.
Well, and I mean, the funny thing is, I didn't even realize that this was Del Toro, and for a while,
right?
I mean, I realized it eventually, but I had seen this movie, and then I'd seen a bunch of other Del Toro's movies, and then I found out that he was in this, that was him, and I was like, whoa, what? Because he doesn't look anything like himself in this movie, even though he just has like some longer hair and a mustache, But
and of course, 40 pounds heavier.
Well, yeah, that's true too. But like this versus like Sicario or something, it's a completely different person.
Yeah.
I still won't forgive him though for not being Khan in Star Trek: Into Darkness. He would have been perfect for that role.
Oh yeah.
I thought Cumberbatch was pretty good though. But
Batch is all right. I like him, and he just has that darkness that would have brought a lot of pathos to Khan again.
Yeah.
I'm just looking up Del Toro's filmography. Yeah, a lot of it, the one that sticks out to me that I didn't know he did in 1989, he did License to Kill. It was in a James Bond film.
Whoa!
Yeah.
I remember that actually.
He plays Dario, is the name. And I mean, I honestly haven't seen that movie, but being in a Bond film that early in his career, it was like his second or third film.
Big Top Pee-wee.
Yeah.
Was he the Wolfman in Big Top Pee-wee?
Duke the Dog-Faced Boy.
Yeah, that's right. I loved that film as a kid.
You don't love it anymore?
Well, no, got issues with nightmares with Pee-wee now.
Yeah.
But yeah,
I love Pee-wee. Pee-wee's great and everything.
Yeah, he wasn't in any nothing that sticks out to me at least. As far and then Fear and Loathing hits on 98, and then he just goes into Traffic. Just all these obviously his performance in Che, where he plays Che Guevara.
Freaking commie.
But I mean, acting wise, yeah, I feel like he's an actor that just kind of doesn't really when you think of really great actors, I feel like he doesn't get enough credit.
No.
Like Sicario, his more recent movies, Sicario, that was a really good movie. And on top of that, his performance in it was great.
I loved him in The Hunted with what's his face?
Oh yeah, the one where he's he was in special ops in the Bosnian conflict.
Yeah, he's kind of gone rogue now. So
yeah.
As the hunted down.
I need to put that. I need to put that on my list to look for that on Blu-ray because I loved that movie.
I've never heard of that before. That sounds kind of cool.
It is. It's pretty much. I mean, I wouldn't say it's a Rambo ripoff, but it definitely has tones of that type.
Yeah. Definitely.
But with him, it's just so great to watch him as hand-to-hand combat as this very focused, very damaged former soldier.
Yeah.
There were some other people in this movie, like I don't know if they're technically cameos or not, but like I don't know his name, but the guy from Law and Order.
I think that's a cameo. That's safe to
Yeah.
say. But the guy from Law and Order that behind the desk at the drug convention hotel.
Yeah, he played the receptionist. You guys know
Okay.
Sven. He played Sven.
Yeah, his name was Sven. Guy from I thought he was great in his role.
He plays Stabler in Law and Order Special Victims Unit, I think.
Yeah.
And but he was in that. I mean, just all the different cameos.
And then the guy that is doing the speech during the drug convention, I always notice him just because he plays the French guy with the mouse in the Green Mile.
Oh yeah, Delacroix.
Yeah.
It's sad. He died right after Green Mile, didn't he?
Did he?
Really?
Sure.
Yeah, he died of AIDS. It's really sad.
Oh, that sucks.
Wow.
I remember when I was younger, I always remembered him because he was like the bad guy in Air Bud.
Air Bud. Yeah, I was about to say that.
Oh my god, yeah.
And I remember that scene at the end of Air Bud whenever they're like,
He was the clown that was trying to get the dog back
Yeah.
for his parties.
I remember him as that guy who got his finger bitten off by Gary Busey in Drop Zone.
Gary Busey, another guy in the movie.
Uh-huh.
Damn. Yeah. So many different like cameos. Just like you could like pick a scene and there's one cameo in it probably at least.
Yeah, almost. It seems like that sometimes.
Even Hunter played a cameo there, didn't he?
Yeah, as himself.
Yeah, he played himself.
Which is kind of weird because he's like, oh, there I am. But it's like, yeah, but you're like 30 years older.
Yeah. It was kind of weird seeing that scene because the scene itself, like you were saying, was like him when he was much younger in the 60s.
Right.
And then like it's 60s him looking at 70s him, or so to speak, or even older him.
Yeah.
Like, yeah. Yeah, I thought his cameo, I would have thought his cameo would have been something a little bit more like prominent in the film, but it just kind of...
Yeah, well, I mean, he's probably just like, I'm not an actor, you know?
Yeah, just put me in it somewhere.
Yeah.
But moving on from the acting and everything, what did you guys think of the cinematography?
Good. I thought it was beautiful. I mean, he captured that feeling of being high, whatever, in the middle of hallucination. So it did its job. Again, personally, did I enjoy the film from that point of view? No. But as for what they set out to do, oh, definitely. I mean, it was great. I mean, if they didn't get an award for this, they should have been nominated at least just for them pushing the limits. I mean, I don't know if they did anything to the shutter or how many lenses they used, but they obviously had to go through a lot to get that type of effect of being high through their eyes.
Yeah.
I felt like
there was a lot of that with just the directing and the shots and a lot of the trackings. The way the
like
camera.
You said earlier, the constant movement of the camera, like it was almost like on some water on an ocean or something, just wavy.
A lot of Dutch angles, a lot of just fisheye skewed perspective, stuff like that.
And that
do you feel like there were a lot of like wide shots or a lot of close-ups?
A lot of close-ups. I feel like
a lot of close-ups.
Yeah, especially when he's trying to narrate and like freaking out about stuff, and there's just a lot of close-ups of Depp and his bug eyes and just looking around like constantly.
Yeah.
But
I mean, it's super effective as far as what it serves its purpose.
Because constantly during the whole movie, pretty much while he's like on drugs, he's paranoid, and like he gives that like the close-up shot of like him or like Benicio del Toro's character, just like they're constantly feeling a paranoid, like, is he hearing what I'm saying? Stuff like that, like in the beginning, and like the bats and stuff in the beginning of the film. That's
one thing with the narration, like the scenes in the beginning when they're driving on the way to Vegas, that I thought were kind of clever, like where he's talking to another cameo, Tobey Maguire.
Yeah. You didn't mention him
in the back seat, or he's talking to Tobey Maguire, and he's like, he's thinking about him, but then he's like, Jesus, did I say that? And he's like, did they hear me? But it's like going back and forth between him talking and the narration, and you kind of lose track of whether he's actually talking or whether it's just the narration going on.
Right.
I thought that was kind of cool.
Right. Besides me, was anyone else freaked out the way McGuire looked? I mean, he just has a creepy vibe.
Dude, he looks kind of like he could be
character from like the Lord of the Rings.
He's not meant to have hair that blonde.
Mm-hmm.
That, like, he seemed like he was like a serial killer almost. Like they just picked up a serial killer and he was contemplating killing them, but then like he found out they were too weird for him, so he was like, "Yeah, I'm getting out of here. See you later." And he even did that. He just kind of like jumped off the back of the car and just left.
And that was funny because he's like, "We had a real freak on our hands." It's like you guys have a trunk full of like drugs and stuff.
Yeah, he didn't really. I mean, if you think about it from his perspective, Tobey Maguire, not the character, but like signed up to play just a part in a movie about Hunter S. Thompson, and you don't have to do anything in it because all he did was get picked up. He kind of like reacted to some stuff, and then it was an easy gig for him. And he was fairly young in his career, you know, like he was kind of just starting out.
Yeah,
did he just get big, or did he like just do Pleasantville? I don't remember if he was even like
Pleasantville, Spider-Man. I think that's when he launched.
Pleasantville's probably the earliest thing. Pleasantville was before Spider-Man, right?
Oh yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
Okay, that's the first thing I remember seeing him in.
He was let's see.
I remember when I
He was
saw
in an episode of Walker, Texas Ranger.
Oh yeah.
I remember when Spider-Man came out, I didn't recognize him at all. Like I felt like it was a.
Really?
Yeah, when the first time I ever watched Spider-Man, which I loved that movie when I was younger, but it seemed to me like he was a no-name. Like they picked somebody that just nobody would recognize, just to kind of as a breakout role, or I don't know.
And I guess I knew about him because I really enjoyed Pleasantville. I'm not sure why, because it's
right.
I think at the time it's because how it brought out the subtext of racism and Common Day with the 50s TV show,
right,
versus the black and white people versus the colored people. But I think I really enjoyed him in that for some reason. And was the Cider House Rules, was that way
that was actually, I'm looking at his filmography right now, and that was a year later from Fear and Loathing. Same with Pleasantville. Pleasantville was actually the same year as Fear and Loathing. It was right after. And like I'm looking through it, and like his first film was The Wizard. He was in that film, and then this boy's
Savage?
yeah, it's that one.
That just got a Blu-ray release, by the way.
Oh yeah.
Oh, I gotta get that.
This Boy's Life he was in. Have you ever seen that? This Boy's Life with Leonardo DiCaprio?
Yes. He was his friend, wasn't he? One of the Boy Scouts?
Or he was yeah, he was one of the, I think it was his stepbrother.
Weird. I know Eliza Dushku was his stepsister in there.
Yeah, that's right. No, he wasn't a stepbrother. He was just a friend.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, he kind of he's actually done some movies that were decent before. He did The Ice Storm, which is another Criterion movie.
It's a good film.
But then Fear and Loathing, and then Pleasantville, Cider House Rules, Ride with the Devil. Spider-Man was 2002, a little bit later than Seabiscuit. Yeah, so I mean it's kind of the same case with Del Toro. He kind of had some work, and then Fear and Loathing right after that, he just got launched into all these movies. Yeah, another cameo. So, cinematography. So we talked about that. I personally, the cinematography, I felt like when I was looking at just the color palette of this movie, like there was no bland colors. It was all like deep reds, deep greens. You know, like if they picked a color for this palette, it was always an extreme version of that color, never like muted. I felt like it was kind of reminiscent of like 90s cinematography in a lot of movies.
Right.
Like there's not real, it's all sharp colors, not really muted, so to speak. But that's my
It
take.
really reflects its environment. Like, it takes it in extremely, enhances everything around it.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, there's parts too where the lighting and stuff. They try to match it to the feel of being on the drugs. You could tell, and it works. It's effective in that way.
Yeah, everything in this movie goes back to the drugs. But that, honestly, if I had to pick like a third character, it would be the drugs itself. Like they they play an integral part in the film, like, and just drug culture in general. But,
they had more of an introduction than the two characters that were main.
Yeah, I know. The best introduction ever in that movie was probably that. Just the checklist of drugs. Introduction, yeah. Of not only drugs, but they had a whole quart of rum, everything else. So.
Oh yeah. Cases of beer.
What did you guys think of the soundtrack? And that's another big part of the movie.
It's critical to the movie itself because it just plays again on the drugs, and also just incorporates each song incorporates itself into the story. It keeps it going. It's almost, there's no quiet really. There's always something happening.
Probably the best use of White Rabbit. Would you have to say?
Yeah.
What about besides like the band and stuff, the actual film score? I mean, I think that helped a lot with the storytelling. I mean, because a lot of it was so random.
Yeah, like I felt like honestly, like the film score itself, like played a backseat to more of the songs that were like in the movie, like Somebody to Love, like Jefferson Airplane, and all those. Like, I felt like the actual score played a backseat to more of the hippie songs and like 60s and 70s songs that were popular during that time. Like those were the prime stars of the soundtrack, so to speak.
Yeah. Like I said, it's integral to the movie itself because it helps explain the story, it gives it a time period of when it's based in a sense, but
the tone of everything.
Yeah.
What do you mean by it helps explain the story?
Well, I guess it just pushes the story in quotations along.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, because it actually makes a lot of sense because when they're in that hotel room, they're just kind of like chilling or whatever. Well, and chilling's not a good word to use, but they get into their hotel room and like Del Toro eventually goes into he gets like bummed out over something. What was it? Oh, Cameron Diaz.
Yeah. He
gets bummed out that he thought Cameron Diaz was hitting on him, and so he like decides he wants to kill himself and goes into the tub and like fills it up with water. Or I'm skipping a whole lot here. Hunter S. Thompson goes down to like play some game at the casino and comes back to the room totally trashed.
Right.
But Del Toro's in the tub, full to the brim with water, and he's like he's like, music. He's like, he wants to play the music, and like he says at the height of White Rabbit, I want you to throw that into the tub, the stereo or whatever.
The grapefruit.
When the rabbit bites its own head off.
So like that like moves the story right along because now we're focused. The story is focused on at the moment the White Rabbit, like that song, and like waiting for that crescendo. And then what does Depp do right at the height? He like distracts him with the grapefruit and like gets out of the room or out of the bedroom with the gun or the knife. Was it the knife? He had the knife.
No. Yeah.
And like Del Toro's like bummed out because he didn't get to kill himself at the end of White Rabbit.
Yeah, that kind of makes.
Oh, you got going through that.
That kind of makes sense too because acid is very much a music oriented. Like a lot of musicians drop acid. A lot of, a lot of people say an acid trip is kind of like almost scored by whatever you're listening to. Like if you're listening to something and you're on acid, it's like the music kind of frames everything. So that scene always made a lot of sense to me.
What is it that Bill Hicks always said? The greatest artists that you've ever loved and the great art has always been fueled by drugs. Like if like Jimi Hendrix, like to take an example from like 60s and 70s, Jimi Hendrix, when he thought of music, he didn't think of notes because he wasn't trained. Like couldn't read notes, but he thought of it in terms of color. And obviously Hendrix was big into drugs and stuff like that at the time because that's what everyone was doing. But he thought of it in terms of color, and I bet you that played acid or any LSD played a heavy role in his musical creations. So I mean, it just goes to show that the music itself played an integral role in the movie as well.
Yeah. I mean, it really was again, like I said, film is not my cup of tea, but as for the technical aspect, it did weave itself perfectly with the colors of cinematography, like you were talking about. Music is color. Everything with the trippy scenes, all the way up to just the acting itself. Which, I mean, if any one of those aspects didn't do its job right, just even a little bit, none of it would have come together at all.
But if you had to pick one, because I would venture to say you're probably the dissenting voice in terms of like out of all four of us, as far as liking this movie, what would you say is the weakest part of the movie?
Oh, I mean,
you'd probably say the story.
I would say like I just say that the story is still the weakest part. It's just, again, I want a little bit more than just a trippy feeling. If it had like some beginning, middle, and end to it, I probably wouldn't feel so divided against it the way I do. But because it bounces so much, I can't get into the film exactly because of those reasons. But that's my only thing I would say. The story itself, I mean, acting, technical wise, perfect. I mean, directing, just excellent. But as for a film, I want something more structured, even if it's just a little structured,
Yeah, I can kind of see that. Like, I obviously like what they said earlier about Gilliam. He was quoted as saying, either you're gonna love this or you're gonna hate this movie. I feel like maybe James kind of said he's never met anyone that thought they were middle of the road about this movie until I guess you thought you gave your opinion on it. So, but Jeff, like, if you had to pick, obviously we know what the strong suits are, the acting and everything. Like, what would you think would be the weakest part of this?
The weak points. I agree with Santi. I'd say story, but I guess that's just everyone's opinion.
Yeah,
the story. Because I mean, if you wanna look at the movie, or say, I don't know, it's like just little glimpses of stuff happening, then I guess it's like a montage of like stuff happening. But I mean, for almost 2 hours of a movie, I don't know, I kind of wanted, like Santi said, a beginning, middle, and end. But
so the traditional story structure kind of thing.
Something, because I mean, like how we talked about Train Spotting. I mean, again, that had same aspects of it with the flashbacks, the drug highs, the hallucinations with the baby crawling on the ceiling. It had all those, but it also had a structured story. The guy eventually, it is kind of a hero's journey. He learns something, he gets money, and he, kind of becomes a better person at the end. Here, it was nothing at all in it together. It was almost like a mess of interesting points, but nothing that it actually tried to make anything out of them.
Yeah, I kind of agree, but I don't think for me, the weakest part was the story. Like, I felt like the story, when you're on a subject like Hunter S. Thompson, like, and his way of writing and gonzo journalism itself, like, I feel like all that was kind of the backseat, because the whole point of gonzo journalism was to put the journalist into the story of whatever he was covering. And like, I feel like that makes sense for this kind of movie, because for someone like Hunter S. Thompson, there should be no middle. There's no beginning, middle, and end to what he's writing about. It's just his perspective of the whole thing. And obviously it's not going to end for him because he's going to go on to do other things. But like, it's just a continuation from one trip to another, so to speak.
Right.
But
and you're completely right. I mean, that's That's the whole point of it. It really again, like I said, it does succeed at what he was trying to show. Terry Gilliam and Thomas is that it was about there was no linear in this whole film. There was no linear storytelling. That's all about feelings going from one trip to the next, and they succeed at that. But in the end of the day, we're watching a movie. We're not trying to watch a documentary here, and that's why it's like I felt like they should have incorporated some type of structure, because you can get entertainment out of a lot of abstract things. We could watch a washing machine go back and forth. Doesn't mean it's a story in there, Yeah. But I totally understand they did accomplish everything they wanted. But if this had something in there more than just them going from trip to trip, I would have been more satisfied with it. Even though they do get everything right.
Yeah. So I guess technically it starts out with them driving to Vegas and him covering that motorcycle race. So I guess that's the story, and I guess the charm of the movie, in a way, is you end up still following him after that story ends, because the drugs and all that other stuff pull you in. You're like, okay, I guess I'll just ride this one out with them and see what's going on. Mm-hmm. So I guess if you wanted to give it a story, that could be the 10-minute story.
Right. And I think a lot of it has to do with if you know who he is when going in to see this film. Again, I came into it when I first saw it, not knowing a thing about Hunter S. Thompson. But if you're a fan of his and know where this film is going, you already know it's going to be trippy. So there's no expectations to not know that's going to become out there.
Right.
Yeah. What do you guys think? What was the weak point for you two?
Honestly,
you can go first.
Yeah, I was gonna say I honestly don't think there was a weak point in this movie. I mean, I can't really pick one if I had to, like, out of all of them, the one that even is slightly less than the others in terms of, like, whether it be the acting, cinematography, direction, whatever. I don't know if I can pick one, to be honest with you.
If there's something you want to change about it,
I guess I'll have to go with the story thing, just because, it's the safe bet. It's as far as, like, everyone wants a linear story. Like, whether you don't want every movie that you ever watch to not have a point or, like, have some kind of structure. Like, so I guess I would pick that one. But, like, even then, it's, like, hard for me. It's
that aspect of it is actually kind of what I like about it.
Yeah.
It's just that it's like, even as absurd of a movie as it is, that almost injects some kind of realism, because life doesn't have a beginning, middle, and end. Like, if you're just following two people on a weekend, there's not necessarily a story. It's just stuff happens, And, like, I feel that way about, like, The Big Lebowski. I love The Big Lebowski, but it's about a rug.
And a little more than that, actually. I disagree with you on that.
A little more there, but sure. I totally get your point from it. It's just the fact that, again, it's kind of like when I'm watching the film Idiocracy, when he goes to watch the film and it's an ass on the film for 2 hours. It's like, is this what that film kind of felt like? It's just drugged for 2 hours. Like, awesome. I get the point from the culture, but as for me, I wanted to see something more about the ass.
So would you say Santi, would you say you agree with Ebert in terms of, like, where's the structure? Like, where's the character arcs?
Right. Like, I mean, I understand what he's saying. Like, if you saw these people in an elevator, you'd want to get off. I mean, personally, if I saw this guy act like that in real life, I'd, punch him in the face. But, as for a film, as a film character, you love him because of that.
Yeah.
Right. That's kind of the appeal to me, is it's kind of like a... It's got that feel where it's like the main character is not necessarily a likable person. From almost kind of like those movies, like House of Cards, where it's like the main character is kind of like the antagonist, like.
And then you find out Kevin Spacey's a monster too in real life.
Yeah.
But I can't. But I'd probably have to say the story, but just very slightly. Like, I still can't bring myself to.
Yeah.
It's like, which finger do you want to cut off?
I totally get what you're saying. Like, there's no real, like,
Right, because it does its job. There's no
not a
complaint
point
about it doesn't do it. It's just it does its job too well for a regular film goer or even a layman person.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Someone going into it blind with like you were saying, like you've never.
Well, I mean, I went into it blind, but I also, I don't know. I was in the right state of mind to watch that
movie. Good way, good save.
But that to me, that's kind of the charm of it, is that it's not. I tend to like those kind of movies where it's like, this isn't what I'm supposed to be. This isn't what is typically in a movie, you know. Like this is not.
It's different. It's.
There's no bad.
Tale.
Right. There's no bad guy. It's not the hero's journey. You know.
Well, with that being said, I guess we'll go around and give our final score of the movie. I guess out of 5 stars we're gonna rate this. We'll start with Jeff. What was your final rating, and just give us a brief why you think that.
Okay. So yeah. Initially, I think I was going to go a little bit lower than what I'm going to give it now, just based on the discussion on it. But as far as all the technical stuff, that like puts it at a 2.5 for me. But with all the discussion now, I'd give it a 3.
Give it a 3?
Yeah.
So kind of a little above middle of the road. You enjoyed it. It's just.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. It's a fun movie. But like at the same time, like me and Santi had said, the story.
Yeah.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Santi, what did you think?
Again, I want to give it my proper outlook on it, but I give it a 2, only because the film, it just does its job. It's not a bad film that it's made horribly, because like we just said, everything about it is made perfectly. But as for a film goer, I want to see something more than what I saw with it. So I give it a 2, and everything else though, like acting, God, I mean, you still love, even though I don't like the film, I do love Johnny Depp's character, and seeing the cameos from later in other films. Like he had a little cameo in Ringo with him I laughed my ass off at that part. But as for the film though itself, I'm just not a fan of it.
Okay.
So 2 it is.
James, what did you think?
I mean, I'm in between 4 and 4.5, just because I probably would have given it a 4.5, but I understand like your complaints about it, but it's at the same time, it's like that your complaint with it is kind of what I like about it, you know. So,
and that's definitely what this whole film is about. It's definitely got both sides to it.
Sure.
And there's so many parts that I love. Like I love the satirical parts with the drug convention where they're talking about like know your dope fiend and all that stuff.
Like your typical propaganda like in the 40s about pot users, how they're evil people.
Reefer madness and all
that.
Right.
So okay, you said between 4.5 and
yeah, well, I guess 4.25 is that? Can I do that?
Yeah, we'll allow it. We'll allow it. As far as myself, I would say I'm going to give this a solid 4. Yeah, I don't know if I probably will later on down the road find some perfect movie out there that we're going to review, but like I feel like this is a solid 4. I really like this movie. I feel like if I were into acid and stuff like that, I'd probably have a even better appreciation for it, but it's solid 4. It's a great comedy if you're into like cutting edge comedy, like edgy humor kind of stuff. So
yeah, well, I guess if you're looking at it as a comedy, what were some of the other films of '98 that were comedies?
You got Big Lebowski.
Just in comparison to see like how different it was. I mean, you're looking at there's something about Mary, Big Lebowski, Rushmore, Wedding Singer. You've got Mail, I guess, if you want to call that a comedy.
It's not a movie.
Waterboy came out that year, it says. Dirty Work. So, I mean, there's a gauntlet of stuff.
But
so.
you know what? And you bring up all those movies, and a lot of those are really great movies, and they're really great comedies. But in terms of, like, I feel like this movie is, like, in a league of its own. Like, I think the closest film to this movie in that all those movies you mentioned would probably be, and it's even hard to say this, but The Big Lebowski, because I would love The Big Lebowski, but like, and you could consider it a drug movie, like, you know, drug culture movie, but that's not the main part of the story. And there's a whole like structure to it and character development and stuff like that.
Right. To me, they're very similar movies. Like I kind of put them together in a way, just because.
I guess in some ways, nonsense.
They're both very absurd, and a bunch of stuff just like snowballs, and stuff happens. You know, it's just like randomness. That's kind of what I like about it, and that's kind of what I like about The Big Lebowski too. So, I will say The Big Lebowski is probably funnier. It's a little bit more quotable.
Yeah, definitely.
But it has more appeal to the general audience.
Isn't that one of us picked that? Didn't?
Yeah, it's going to be one of the later episodes. Jeff picked it.
Yeah. Okay.
Great film.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great. I could go on about the Coen brothers for a while, but because I pretty much love everything they do.
Yeah. As far as like if you're not initiated in our little Facebook group, I'll go ahead and read off like some of the other episodes we're going to be doing this season. So the 7 other ones we'll be doing will be The Thing is coming up for our little Halloween episode. Jeff picked that one. Not the remake or whatever, the prequel.
John Carpenter's The Thing.
John Carpenter's The Thing, 1982. Then There Will Be Blood. I chose that one. Yeah, and then we got Gattaca. Santi chose that one. The Prestige, which was chosen by James B. Then The Big Lebowski. Jeff chose that one. Followed by Saving Private Ryan, which Santi chose that one. And then last but not least, Pulp Fiction, which I chose. Mm-hmm. So that's what it's looking like for our episode list for this season. You guys have anything you want to close out? Any final thoughts of the film that we haven't covered? Any housekeeping that you want to get?
As far as the movie goes, I think we got it all covered. I mean, if you're not, which most of you aren't, because no one knows about us yet, following our Facebook page.
Oh, yeah.
Go ahead and mention that since you brought it up already.
So this is kind of how the whole podcast started to begin with, even the name. Like, Jeff and I kind of started a Facebook group called the Film Fanatics, and basically it's just a group for discussion of film, posting news on film, anything that your collection, film collection, that kind of thing. I'll go ahead and give the URL. So if you want to join, you can. But, wow, where is it? This whole part's going to get edited out. It's not even pulling up for me. Jeff, did you kick me?
That's what she said.
Yeah, I kicked you out. I got those admin powers. No, but so it's just, if you get on Facebook, search the Film Fanatics podcast, it should pop up.
Yeah, that's our page, our Facebook page, but there's also a group, just the Film Fanatics. You should be able to find us fairly easily. We've got over 250 members right now, so.
We'll link it wherever we post this.
Yeah, we'll link it. But yeah, join us there. The discussion continues. We
got an Instagram page too that we just started up. So on our Instagram page, that is Film Fan Pod. Pretty simple, pretty easy. You'll be able to find it. We'll go ahead and post pictures of what we're watching, some previews, anything like that comes to mind, we'll throw on there. And we also have a letterboxd under the same name, Film Fan Pod. It will include lists of what we're going to be working on for seasons coming up, as well as what we're working on currently, and just kind of reviews on there and such. So go ahead and give us a follow.
Yeah. Santi, anything you want to throw out there, wrap it up, or anything?
No, just awesome that we actually got to start doing this.
Yeah, I'm excited for some of the discussion we'll have and some of the movies we'll be reviewing. James, what do you think? Anything you want to add?
No.
All right, well, I guess this is the Film Fanatics. We're signing off, and we'll see you next time. The Film Fanatics podcast is produced and copyrighted by Department 80 Productions. Visit us for more podcasts and other projects at department80.com. Theme music entitled Furious Freak by Kevin MacLeod, Incompetech.com. Licensed under Creative Commons by Attribution 3.0 license.